It was quite a bombshell when newspapers across Pakistan published that 81 Pakistani professors had been selected by Stanford University as being among the top 2% of the world's scientists. So when I read this, the first thought that occurred to me was, who are these people? And it was easy to find out because various universities, Government College Lahore, Punjab University, etc., had very proudly announced awards, separate awards for these professors. And when you look at the names, you say, really? I, in fact, knew several of them, not all of them, but enough of them to know that as students at Quaid-e-Azam University or as people I knew generally, that their work was by no means worthy of any kind of award. So the first thing that I did was to go to the net and check what Stanford University had published on this rating of scientists, and I could not find anything. So I found finally a paper which gave the names of 4 researchers who had published a paper on scientometrics, that is to say, collecting citations, numbers of papers, ordering them in a particular way. And one of those authors, his name is Professor John Ioannidis from Stanford University. He was the lead author in this paper. I wrote to Professor Ioannidis and I said, Professor Ioannidis, I have just written an analysis of what has been reported in Pakistani newspapers. It has been published in Dawn newspaper of Pakistan. Please look at this and tell me the following. First, is this a Stanford University publication? And second, do you think that this list genuinely measures scientific quality? He wrote back the same day and he said, I have read your newspaper article in Dawn. I absolutely agree with you that this is not a Stanford University publication and that this has been misreported as such, perhaps deliberately. Secondly, that I too, that is I, John Ioannidis, also have great reservations about rating scientists in this way. Now you see, the problem is that these days, publishing papers has become a game. You don't have to do research. You don't have to discover or invent something new. What you have to learn is the art of publishing a paper in some journal. And these days, you can do this by 101 different ways. The earlier way didn't work all that well. You simply copied something from the internet. But now there are software programs like Turnitin, which make this a little more difficult. So what you do is you steal a bit from here, steal a bit from there, you put it together, and you can even create your own data, fake ideas, wrong calculations. Who's going to check it? Because the journal that you will send this to is likely to be a fake journal. It could be one of those journals which are published from Switzerland, and all you have to do is pay a certain amount of money. Sometimes it's $500, sometimes it's $1,500, whatever. But with payment, you can get practically any paper published today. So the publication of papers has become completely, totally nonsensical. But then, suppose you get your nonsense published in some paper. Well, then you have to get it cited, because simply getting it published is not enough. Somebody has to give a reference to that. How do you do that? Here is how it is done these days. So suppose I write a nonsensical paper. Well, I have a friend over there who also writes nonsensical papers. Like me, is incompetent. I will cite him, he will cite me. He is in Rome or in in China somewhere or somewhere in the world, these people actually don't know each other except by reputation and except that they are partners in a crime. That crime is, I scratch your back, you scratch my back, I cite your fake paper, you cite my fake paper. And so this is what is called a citation cartel. And this way, a nonsensical paper can get cited 1,000 times. There's no problem about that. All you need is friends spread across the globe who are like you. And so this is how people manage to get ahead in our system, in the Pakistani system, but not just in the Pakistani system. This is true for India, it's true for China, it's true for Bangladesh. This is truly an international web of crime. There is a list, an international list on which a university is rated. They believe it. They say, wow, these are people who have really done their work. They have looked at universities in Beijing, in Shanghai, in London, in Paris, in Delhi, in Islamabad, in Karachi, wherever. Now, there are these international university ranking organizations, and they are a scam. It is complete, total nonsense, and let me tell you why that is so. You set up a commercial organization in some city of the world. It has maybe 5, 7, 10 employees. Now, there is no possibility that those employees can ever go to 1,000, 2,000, or 5,000 universities. There's no chance that even one person could go there. And imagine that if one person was to go there, how expensive it would be, how many days he would have to stay, the hotel expenses. And then what do you do when you get over there anyway? Because in a university which is so big, you have to go to every department to see what those departments are doing, etc. So all that is not possible. Instead, what that ranking organization, and so there's QS, there's Shanghai ranking, there's the London review of, there's the higher education, etc., etc. All these ranking organizations, they simply send out a questionnaire. That questionnaire is then filled by a university's employees. We don't know what they fill in it, but they fill in questions such as, how many students do you have? How much land do you have? What is the student to teacher ratio? How many publications are produced? How many Nobel Prize winners do you have? And of course, we don't have any. But these are the questions that are sent out. Now, the replies that they receive are then put into a computer. That computer then makes out a list. That list is then published. Now, here is the problem, that sometimes they use this criterion, sometimes they use that criterion. So sometimes one university will come out way at the top, and sometimes it will be nowhere to be seen on a list. So this is why one should never, never trust these university ranking organizations. They have a formula now by which they can promote any university to almost any ranking. Of course, they have to retain some measure of credibility, so they will put Harvard at the top and MIT second and Stanford third, or some combination of this, and University of London and University of Cambridge and Oxford and so forth, Sorbonne, etc. But apart from that, a university can now literally pay for it to be at this level, that level, or that level. Why? Because that brings in the money. When it was reported that 81 Pakistani professors had made it to the top. And this was in at least 20 Pakistani newspapers, and it was on BBC as well. Well, the first thing that those news organizations, newspapers should have done is simply ask Stanford University whether it is a Stanford University publication, and they did not. Now, here is where the problem is, that news, when it appears in print, has a credibility, and people start believing it. They don't investigate. Now, in this particular case, it was obvious that there was something wrong because, look, if 81 Pakistani scientists have made it to the very top, surely they must have done something other than published papers. Surely they would have some inventions, some discoveries, something that would have made it to the news in some other shape or form. But there was nothing like that. If you go to any of these universities where these 81 people are, do you see the laboratories humming with work? Do you see seminars being given? Do you see people scratching on the blackboard and saying, it's not this way, it's this way, new discoveries being made? That's that excitement that you see, let's say at MIT, at Harvard, at other places like that? No, you do not see that. In fact, I would say that if you were to put most of these 81, so look, I don't know all of the 81, I just know a handful of the 81, but of those, if you were to ask them simple questions on college level physics, mathematics, computer science, chemistry, you wouldn't get a good answer. You would find that these people who have published dozens, hundreds, and even thousands of papers do not know their basics, the subject basics. Yes, I know some people don't like what I write, but that's okay. They can have their opinion, and that's fine. But you see, in Pakistan, we are out for shortcuts. We want to get to the top. We want to have our people recognized across the world. Our scientists are the best scientists in the world. The car that we made, remember the water car? The water car was supposed to be such a fantastic invention that the whole world would soon be following suit. And then what happened? We fool ourselves if we start believing such people. Once you start looking for shortcuts, once you don't go the long way, the hard way is to actually learn your material, learn your subject, work step by step. And if you are honest, then slowly, step by step, you make your way up to the top. But then, if you just want shortcuts, then be prepared for spectacular failures and for exposés like this one. Stanford University is denying that they issued that list. There was no such list. It's a slap on our face, a slap on the face of the Pakistani media. We should not be doing these things. A good university can be one of many things. So let's look at what a university is supposed to do. One purpose is to produce high-level thinkers, philosophers, scientists who think about the origins of space and time, or who look back at ancient archaeology, or who decipher languages, hieroglyphics, very, very complicated things that have only to do with intellectual curiosity. So, in old times, universities used to be focused on intellectual matters, and that's how the scientific revolution came about, and that's important. So, that's very good That makes for a good university. Then, in our day and age, we live in the age of technology, so we need engineers, doctors, economists, people who are professionals. They maintain a society, they keep it running, they are very important. And so a good university will produce good economists, good engineers, good people in the professions. Then there's a third aspect to universities, and that is producing good citizens, people of conscience, those who can understand society and know different options and be able to evaluate them. So the liberal arts is very important too. Ideally I say, because nothing like this exists in the world, you should have all three of these within one institution, but you can't have that. So there are compromises, and so the best universities in the world, like MIT, Harvard, Stanford, Sorbonne, University of Cambridge, University of Oxford, etc., they manage to get some kind of a formula, combine all of these in some way, but of course there's no such thing as a perfect university. In principle, it is the Higher Education Commission which should have checks and balances. And they do have something called a quality control cell over there, but it doesn't work. The reason is that we don't have a proper metric by which to evaluate universities. Now, currently, universities and the professors within those universities are considered good if they publish a lot of papers. Now, in this day and age, the publication of papers has become meaningless, because from the internet you can take something from there, or you can generate fake data very easily. You can put this all together into a paper, get this published in some journal or the other, and that whole thing has completely flopped. It has failed because we do not have enough people in any field, whether that field is physics, maths, computer science, chemistry, biology, whatever, who can evaluate their colleagues honestly and properly. Because the number of high quality professionals in Pakistan is so low, therefore that method will not work. So then the question is, what will work? And there is no perfect solution for this, but I've said this repeatedly, that if there is a professor who is claiming that he's done original research work, well, get him or her to stand before a camera and in front of a board explain in reasonably simple terms so that others in the field can understand. And so it's in principle, what you could do is, any professor who says that I have done a piece of original work, tell you in front of the camera what that work is, let that be recorded, let that be put for general access upon the HEC website, and I think this will take out 90%, maybe 80% of the fraud. Because when somebody is in front of the camera, he or she has to say what has been done in that paper, and then it is for others to evaluate. I agree this is not a perfect solution. For one, there are not enough people in Pakistan who can evaluate that work. But since this is going to be available for general access, people in India and China and America and Japan, they will also be able to see it. And then it becomes embarrassing, not just for that person, but for that institution and for the HEC to reward that person for that particular paper. So that is one way. It's a very important way. But then I think the most important thing that is lacking in our universities is understanding of the basics of the subject. Now, for this, we cannot use a domestic measure. We cannot say that the HEC will make an examination which will test entering lecturers or assistant professors or associate professors. It can't be done by the HEC because the HEC does not have that competency either. So there's only one thing then, which is to have examinations like the GRE, Graduate Record Examination, which is used for entrance into American universities. It's not a hard test, but it checks every aspect of your understanding of the basics of the field, whether that be physics or math or whatever. Now, when I was chairman of the physics department at Quaid-e-Azam University, we in fact did impose that requirement, and initially our students did very badly. This was for entrance into the PhD program, and a requirement for graduation a little bit later. It's like they used to score in the bottom 30 percentile, 40 percentile. But once we made this a requirement, and once we said you've got to go and learn your basics, then they actually started doing much better. So my contention here is that if you want to check fraud, if you want to have the right kind of teachers entering our universities in Pakistan, then you've got to have some kind of measure, some kind of metric that is not domestic, that is not Pakistani, that is international. I'm not talking about Islamiyat or Pakistan studies or something that is related to something specifically to do with Pakistan. But there is no such a thing as Pakistani physics or Pakistani chemistry or Pakistani computer science. These are international fields, and so we must be prepared to judge ourselves on the basis of something that is international.